So today we talked about percentages and how they relate to fractions and decimals. So what we did is we just converted between those three things in different ways. So I'm going over some of the problems that are really similar to what's on the homework, especially some of the ones that are a little more confusing than others, and I'm just going to do them in this video. So let's start with 3.5%. We want to change that to a decimal, and we want to change it to a fraction. So 3.5%. I'm going to, anytime you see a percent sign, you just take the number and you put it over 100. Well, now I have a decimal inside of a fraction. Well, to get rid of this decimal, I can multiply 3.5 times 10. So 3.5 times 10 would be 35. Another way to do that would be to say, well, 3.5 times 10, by multiplying something by 10, I just move the decimal over one place because there's 1 0, and I move it to the right because it's getting bigger. And this becomes 35. So that's two ways of getting rid of this decimal. This becomes 35, and so I'm multiplying that by 10. If I multiply this by 10, I get 1,000, okay? It's in fraction form that I need to simplify. Before I do that, I'm going to take advantage of the format that it's in and show it as a fraction, or as a decimal. So 35 thousandths, that means there's tenths, hundredths, thousandths. This last digit has to be in the thousandths. So that goes there, and then the 3 goes here, and there's a space left, so I put it zeros. That is 35 thousandths. So 0.035 is my decimal. Now let's take my fraction, 35 over 1,000, and simplify it. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom by 5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. 1,000 divided by 5 is 200. And I can't simplify that even further, so my fraction is 7 over 200. Okay, so that's the first one. Now we have 7/8. We have a fraction. We're going to change it to a decimal and to a percent. Well, 7/8 equals blank over 100. I want something over 100. That's how you get a percent. That's how you get a decimal. But unfortunately, there's no whole number you can multiply 8 by to get 100. So this isn't going to work very well. So I'm just going to change this to a decimal by dividing. Well, 7/8 is the same thing as 7 divided by 8. Any fraction is also a division problem. You can do this with any fraction. So I'm going to take 7, I'm going to divide it by 8. Well, 7, I can change that to 7.000, which I'm going to need to do because my answer is going to be less than 1. 8 goes into 7 0 times. It goes into 78 times. 8 times 8 is 64. If I subtract this, I get 6. I bring down the 0. And 8 goes into 67 times. 7 times 8 is 56. I subtract. I get 4. I bring down the 0. 8 goes into 40 exactly 5 times. So my decimal is 0.875. So 0.875. Let me write that as a fraction. 875 over 1,000. Now that needs to be something over 100. Now this I can divide and make into 100. Okay, I just need to divide this. I just need to divide 1,000 by 10, and I get 100. So that means I need to divide this by 10. Now I can take 875, I can divide it by 10 by just moving it to the left one place because it has just 1 0, and I would get 87.5. But if you don't remember how to do that, you can just do it the old-fashioned way. 875 divided by 10. 10 goes into 8 0 times. 10 goes into 87 8 times. And I get 75. 10 goes into 75 7 times. And I have nothing to bring down, so I have to add a decimal and some zeros. And I bring down a 0. 10 goes into 50 exactly 5 times, and my decimal goes up, so I get 87.5. And 87.5 over 100 is going to give me my percent, because it's over 100. That is my percent, 87.5. Okay, so 87.5%. Now, let's do the next one. We have 4 1/4. We gotta change that to a decimal and to a percent. Well, there's a number of ways we can go about doing this. Let me first change it to a decimal. So I have 4 1/4. I can change this to a mixed number, or an improper fraction. First, 4 times 4 is 16, plus 1 is 17, so that's 17 over 4. And then I can make that equal to 100. 4 times 25 is 100. 17 times 25 would be 5 times 7 is 35. 7 times 2 is 14. Plus 3 is 17. Scratch, lay an egg. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. I add them together. And oops. And I get 425. So I get 425 over 100. Well, my last digit is 5. I put that in the hundredths place. My next digit is 2 before that, and then 4. So 4.25 would be the decimal. Okay, now 425 hundredths, that's already in, percentage form. So it's 425%. And when you have a whole number and you take that and you convert that to a percentage, you're going to get something over 100. So this makes sense. Next one. 720% to a decimal and a fraction. So here's another one. What's happening? So here's another one that is over 100%. So I'm probably going to get a whole number, or I'm definitely going to get a whole number from this. So for 720% to a decimal and a fraction. So 720% is going to be 720 over 100. Well, let me make that into a decimal first, because it's already in this nice decimal, almost decimal format. 720 hundredths. It's my decimal, tenths, hundredths place. So the 0 goes here, the 2 goes here, the 7 goes here. So 7.20, or it's just 7.2. Okay, now as a fraction, I can just simplify what I have here. I can divide the top and bottom by 10. So knock off those zeros, I get 72 tenths. And I can divide that by 2. I get 36 over 5. And that is as simplified as it's going to get. Now I'm going to make it into a mixed number. 5 goes into 36 7 times. 7 times 5 is 35. If I subtract that from 36, I get 1. And my denominator stays the same. So it's 7 1/5. Now, 1 over 500. This fraction, 1/500th to a decimal and to a percent. So 1 over 500 is, I need to change that to something over 100. Well, this is easy to do because I just divide this by 5. So in order to get this numerator, I need to divide 1 by 5. So 1 divided by 5. I put a decimal, some zeros. 5 goes into 1 0 times. 5 goes into 10 2 times, and I'm done. It's 0.2. So that looks like it's 0.2%. So 0.2%. Okay, so 0.2 over 100. It's not completely obvious how you would change this to a decimal, so I'm just going to take 1 over 500 and I'm going to divide it. And that'll tell me exactly where my numbers go. Okay, 500 goes into 1 0 times. 500 goes into 10 0 times. 500 goes into 100 0 times. 500 goes into 1,000 2 times. 2 times 500 is 1,000. Exactly, so I have 2 thousandths. 0.002. Oh, I put these backwards, but it's okay. So 1 over 500 is 2 thousandths and 0.2%. Now I'm going to take 37 1/5% and change it to a decimal and a fraction. So I start out with a 37 1/5%, and what I'm going to do is change it to an improper fraction. I can use that using the jelly bean method. So we make a little jelly bean around the whole number of the denominator and multiply them. 37 times 5. 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18. So we get 185, and then we add 1, and we get 186 fifths. So, percent. So to change this to a decimal number, I can just put this number over 100. 186 over 5 over 100. So I have a fraction within a fraction. So what I can do with this bar here is that I know a fraction is the same thing as a division problem, so I'm going to take 186 over 5, and I'm going to divide it by 100 because a fraction is the same thing as a division problem. Now I can make this into 100 over 1. When dividing fractions, don't ask why. Flip the second number and multiply. So I get 186 over 500. Okay, so that is my fraction. So I'm going to simplify as much as I can. I can divide the top and bottom by 2 because they're both even. Now what is 186 divided by 2? That's going to be 93. This gives me 93 over 250, and I think that is simplified. So 93 divided by 3, because I know this is divisible by 3, because 9 plus 3 is 12, gives me 31, and I believe that's a prime number. And this is 250 is not divisible by 3, so 93 over 100, or over 250 is my fraction. Now let me change that to a decimal. And I'm just going to do that by dividing 93 and 250. 93.000 divided by 250. Now, 250 does not go into 9, it does not go into 93, but it does go into 930. I'm guessing 3 times. 250 times 3 would be 750. So let me put 750 down here and subtract, and I get 180, and I bring down the 0. So how many times does 250 go into 1,800? I'm going to take a guess and say it's probably 7. 250 times 7. 7 times 0 is 0. 7 times 5 is 35. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 3 is 17. Yep, that's how many times it goes in. 7 times 250 is 1,750. If I subtracted that, I would get 50. And I bring down the 0. 250 goes into 500 2 times. And exactly. So my decimal is 0.372. Well, here's another way of doing it. That's probably a little bit easier. 37 and 1/5. Well, I'm just going to change the 1/5 to a decimal. 1 divided by 5. 5 goes into 10 2 times, so it's 0.2. So it becomes 37.2. So 37, so my decimal is going to be 37.2 over 100, which is 37.2 divided by 100, which means I just take this decimal from 37.2 and then move it 2 digits to the left, because there's 2 zeros in 100, and we're going to the left because we're getting smaller because we're dividing, and I get 0.372. And I can take that 372 over 1,000, because this is the thousands place, and I can simplify it, and then I would eventually, if I divided the top and bottom by 4, I would get this. So 2 different ways to do this one. I hope that helps.